Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond the limits.
Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it will help getting our show to others and help us get to our next milestone. Today, we are speaking with Xavier Cano. Xavier is the founder and CEO of Resilience Catalyst Solutions, LLC, and co-author of the Latino Leadership Playbook. He is a leading mindset and manifestation coach and international speaker certified by the ICF. He helps organizations boost sales and improve employee performance through the Revenue Growth Mindset Program. Xavier, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Enrique, for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's exciting to be diving into this specific subject matter because as we're ending the year, I know a lot of people are looking for learning on how to position themselves for a better next year. And I'm happy to be covering this. And folks, we will be speaking about manifesting leadership, harnessing mindset to inspire and achieve. But before we get into that, Xavier, tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So my background originally was in industrial engineering, and I was that type of person who loved to fix things, right? How do you make things quicker? How do you make things cheaper? How do you make things more effective? How do you innovate? And that led me to a long career as an operations consultant. And so I worked for corporate America for about 16 years. But I had an interesting experience in January of 2016. I found myself in a place where I wasn't happy. Things weren't working out the way that I wanted them to, and I didn't know why. And so that led me to my very first life coach. And during this 20-minute session, she told me all of these things that completely changed the trajectory of my life. Because at the time, I didn't know what it meant to not own your power, to not own your authenticity. I didn't know what a limiting belief was. I didn't realize that I didn't have any tools on how to manage stress. And so she taught me many things that completely changed who I was. And I was able to transform into a better version of myself. And I was so impressed with how you can achieve so many more things when your mindset is going in the right direction, that I continued working with this lady for many years. And then I started working with other coaches as well to learn information. And then I realized, you know what, I want to teach this. I want to teach this to people so that people realize that whether you realize it or not, we are manifesting things every single day. And to the extent that we understand what our mind is doing, we're able to tap into knowledge that we didn't even realize was there, right? And so our mind is very powerful. And so now this is what I do in present day. I talk to corporations. I have a lot of one-on-one coaching clients where we talk about mindset. What can you do so that way you position yourself in a way that you can be more successful and you can become a better version of yourself? You did talk a little bit about the revenue growth mindset model, and it's a model that I've created where basically it's about understanding your story. It's about owning your story, owning your why in everything that you do. It's about recognizing your value as well. It's about understanding that when we embrace change, it's not about changing who we are, but it's about transforming into better versions of ourselves. It's about managing stress. It's about gaining emotional intelligence. It's about removing limiting beliefs. And in doing so, not only do we become, like I said, better versions of ourselves, happier people who are able to accept abundance in our lives, but we're able to pass this down to the people that we love as well. We're essentially able to inspire other people by essentially us being ourselves. And so that's what I now do in present day.
Outstanding. Now, you mentioned something earlier. Manifestation happens whether you realize it or not, right? And there's a lot of people that say, I don't know why I attract these type of people. Where you are doing things and in the background, things are working. And whether you like it for the positive or it comes for the negative, things are happening. And I love that you said, I just didn't know that this was a thing. I didn't know that this was a thing. A lot of people are going through life not knowing that things are. And, when we're talking about the leaders, how does a leader's mindset influence their ability to manifest success for themselves and their teams? And can you share maybe a specific example where your mindset shaped a positive outcome?
It's an excellent question because most of us don't realize that for the average person, 80% of their thoughts tend to be negative. It's a statistic from an organization around mental health. And it's interesting to think that 80% of our thoughts every single day are negative. And so if we're leaders and we don't understand that, and we don't have tools on how to manage that, then guess what? We are essentially are at risk of passing that negativity down to our teams, to our colleagues, right? And so as leaders, the more that we're in tune with our mindset, and even as entrepreneurs, the more that we are in tune to our mindset, the better results that we are going to get, because it puts us into positions where we realize that there are certain activities that we should participate in every single day. There's certain actions we should be taking so that we're proactively managing our mindset and bringing it down from the statistic of 80% negative, maybe 20%, maybe 15%. One thing I want to clarify too is that just because we're thinking about something maybe in a negative way for a second, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's essentially a clue to a better way of doing something that can be changed, right? And so if we're thinking negatively, it's a clue of maybe something that we have inside that we can address if we feel compelled and are ready to do so, right? And so when I think about an actual example of how I was able to leverage my mindset, there is a tool that I do teach as part of some of my workshops. And one of those tools is to assume positive intent right before you're about to have maybe a difficult conversation. And so, look, there was a time when I was working with somebody, and I wouldn't set my boundaries because I didn't know I could set my boundaries. I didn't even know what that meant. And so when I worked with my life coach, she taught me the concept of setting boundaries, but she also taught me the concept of assuming positive intent. And so there was this individual that was essentially doing something during meetings that I didn't like, that I felt was kind of crossing my boundaries. And so the first thing is I recognize that, guess what? To the extent that we feel compelled to do so, to the extent we feel ready, and even to the extent that we feel psychologically safe to do so, it's okay to set your boundaries. So that way you can show other people how you want to be treated. And so that was the first step. The second step was to assume positive intent, meaning that I'm assuming that this conversation is going to go well. And so when you put your mindset in a place where you know that the conversation is going to go well, things are going to be successful, you start thinking about the things that you probably should do in order for that to happen, right? And that technique in itself can increase the chances of that conversation going well. And so I wrote down what I wanted to tell this person. I assumed positive intent, and I delivered the message. And the reaction was actually pretty favorable. They told me, you know what, I didn't realize that you felt that way. I didn't realize I was coming across a way. And by I am talking about them speaking to me. And they said, you know what, next time I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So that way I respect your boundaries. And so that way I come across the way that I really want to come across. And so again, as leaders, we have to be able to recognize that our mindsets are very powerful. The things that we do not take control of in our own mind, where we are at risk of passing down something negative to somebody else, right? And surely set your boundaries. And as leaders, you are going to have some difficult conversations. As entrepreneurs, you'll have difficult conversations. And even as colleagues, you may have an opportunity to engage in a difficult conversation, but assuming positive intent can absolutely make a difference.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And as leaders, we are prone to find ourselves in obstacles in our mind that won't allow us to set those boundaries, won't allow us to articulate it in a way where it is a positive outcome, right? But also, it affects us in our operations as leaders, let's say by our vision, right? And leaders are the ones positioned to have that vision, cast it, and allow their people to manifest that, right? So leaders often face obstacles that challenge their vision. How can maintaining a manifestation focused mindset help in overcoming setbacks and staying aligned with long-term goals?
And that's really important to have that in the back of your head, because like I said, we are always manifesting whether we realize it or not. And the majority of the obstacles that we will experience in our entire lifetime are not necessarily the ones that other people impose on us, but it's the ones that we impose on ourselves. And so when I do teach manifestation, we always start off with understanding, what is it that you want, right? What is it that you want in a specific area of your life? Because one of the biggest reasons why people don't manifest is because they simply don't know what they want. And then once they're able to get to a point where they say, you know what, this is what I want, now it's important to recognize, what is it that's giving you doubt in accomplishing those goals? Doubt can be represented as limiting beliefs, right? And so I teach an exercise on how do you recognize what your limiting beliefs are for a specific goal, right? And so when you think about leaders and you think about their vision and you think about them removing obstacles, the very first obstacle is removing the one that you have within, right? Of even being able to accomplish that goal. And an easy exercise that you can do is simply asking yourself, for the specific goal that I want, do I have a limiting belief or limiting beliefs that will prevent that from happening? The interesting thing is that our minds are so powerful that we will usually hear a response when we ask the question, and we'll realize, well, it looks like I need to work on this. It looks like I may need to work on that. And so sometimes working with a coach is helpful, right? Maybe sometimes talking to somebody else to maybe clarify something that might be giving you doubt might be helpful, right? But removing those limiting beliefs, removing that doubt is going to be key in being able to manifest that vision, right? Because when there is no doubt, then you have flow, right? You're able to flow in the way that you're supposed to. As leaders, we also have to take into consideration that we're not just dealing with our own limiting beliefs, but the limiting beliefs of other people. And so if we come across as a leader that doesn't have a limiting belief and truly owns the vision, we increase the chances that other people will come on board as well. But it starts with us. And so that's one of the best ways to ensure that obstacles do not get in the way of your vision, is by simply addressing your own limiting beliefs.
Now, there's some listeners or viewers that may be saying, Javier, Enrique, this all sounds so nice in in theory, right? Because sometimes manifestation is viewed as abstract, right? It's not real. You have to be cognizant of your position in life and your beliefs and this and that and the other in order to grasp this whole thing. So, what practical strategies can leaders use to integrate mindset work and manifestation into their daily routines and decision making processes?
Absolutely. And so I have always been a huge proponent of creating SMART goals, right? So I'm sure a lot of people have heard of SMART goals. It's an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And so when we think about our goals and we put them into that framework and we're specific about what we want, we know that we can measure it. We know that it's achievable to some degree, it's relevant, and it's time bound. We increase the chances of being able to manifest it. And so manifestation, just to be clear, is simply about taking the beliefs that you have, the thoughts that you have, the intentions that you have, and making them into reality. That's essentially what manifestation is. And so sometimes we know what we want, but we're not being clear about when we want it, right? Do we want it in the next week? Do we want it in the next month? Do we want it by the end of the year, right? And so sometimes when we forget to put a time limit to it, then we don't know when we want it, right? We don't know when we want to essentially manifest it. In other words, if I know that I want to manifest something by the end of the month and I say I've decided to have this by this date, it increases the chances of happening because now I realize that there's certain actions I need to be taking to ensure that happens by this specific date. And so for me, that is a great way and a practical way to manifest. Also, the piece on whether it's measurable. And so a mistake that a lot of people make is they simply just say something very general like, I want to increase revenue. Well, it's a very generic statement because if you increase your revenue, let's say by 1 penny by the end of the year, you have essentially manifested your goal. You've increased revenue. A penny increase is an increase in revenue. But I'm sure that with this goal, you probably want to significantly increase your revenue, not just a penny. But if you're not being specific, then how can you put yourself in a mindset to get exactly what it is that you want? And so are you looking to increase your revenue by $1 million annually? Is it $1 million quarterly? Is it something else? And so being able to measure that is extremely important. Being specific about it is extremely important, right? If you want to improve quality, for example, how are you measuring quality, right? Is it a number of reduced defects? Is it something else, right? And so I'm a huge proponent of SMART goals because it kind of takes us away from this abstract concept of manifestation into one that's more practical, where if I say that I want to accomplish a certain goal by this specific date and this amount of revenue or this specific measurement and quality, now I have something to work towards.
That's very powerful because it takes your thoughts from wishing, right? Wishing and hoping to actually strategizing around that which you want to see. And that is so important. Now, I know that I have seen, and you mentioned, going into a meeting and, being able to say, hey, this is what I have as a boundary and setting some things in order where you can protect yourself, especially in a positive way. But I've also seen people and leaders actually come into a meeting and the whole room changed. It's just that powerful of an energy that they bring. And leaders' energy often sets the tone for their team. So, how can leaders foster a culture of positive mindset and intentional manifestation within their organization?
And that's a great question, and it's interesting because I have a workshop called Mindset Matters: Fostering Strong Teams, and it's a pretty eye-awakening workshop because it shows different ways of thinking that don't really represent reality. And when I first say that, people think, okay, well, what does that mean? A way of thinking that doesn't represent reality? Well, essentially, there's ways that we think that we believe that what we're seeing is actually reality, and it really isn't. It's really, we're being influenced by a filter in our mind. A filter in our mind is affecting the way that we see things. The issue is that if we're a leader and we're trying to convey a message or lead a certain way, if we're leading with a filter that doesn't really represent reality, we are at risk again that we are creating a toxic work environment because we're giving directives, assignments, responsibilities that are not based on what reality actually is. And so I'll clarify that. In this workshop, I talk about 5 mindset traps. One of those mindset traps I call the myopic critic. The myopic critic is somebody who only focuses their mind on the negative aspect of a situation. In other words, they fail to look at the situation holistically, right? What are the positive things that have happened in the situation? What are the negative things that have happened in the situation? How can we ensure that we continue to foster the positive things? How can we address the negative things? The myopic critic only looks at the negative. They fail to look at the positive. And so guess what happens? You're a leader, and now you're having your one-on-ones with your direct reports, and you never bring up the things that they did well. Why? because you're not looking at the situation for what the reality actually is. You're only looking at the reality, at the situation based on the negative. And so guess what happens? Now your employee feels like maybe they're not adequate. Maybe now they start to develop limiting beliefs. Now they start to feel unsure of themselves because you've only brought up the areas of opportunity and you have failed to discuss what is it they're doing well that you want them to continue doing. See, that's the myopic critic. It's a way, and remember, a mindset trap is a way of looking at something that doesn't really represent reality. And if you're only looking at a situation with only the negative, you're not looking at it holistically. And so therefore, you're not really addressing reality. You're only addressing part of it. And so I love this workshop. I do teach 4 other mindset traps, but that's an example of how not understanding that mindset piece will prevent you from essentially manifesting what it is that you really want. Because to really get out what you want from your team, you must be looking at reality for what it really is.
Absolutely. Earlier we mentioned and we was talking about success, right? The actions required to see these manifestations and these things that you visualize to come to pass. And while manifestation emphasizes belief and visualization, success requires action. So, how can leaders balance visionary thinking with the discipline and effort needed to achieve those results?
That's excellent. And so everybody wants to manifest something, but us sitting in our desk or lying on the couch is not going to create it, right? There's some action that does have to take place. And so we do have to take some practical approaches. And so I would say number one, you definitely want to create an action plan, right? And so you've created your SMART goal, right? And now you've done the work to see, do I have any limiting beliefs that may prevent this from happening? You've addressed that, right? You've dealt with that, and now you want to actually take action. What are the 2, 3, 4 things that I can do every single day that will bring me closer to that goal, right? And so maybe there's 2 things I need to get done today that will drive that. Maybe there's 1 thing I can do tomorrow. Maybe there's 3 things. And so it's really about now creating that action plan. What does that action plan look like? Now, in a corporate environment, you're not going to be able to achieve everything by yourself. And so you're going to need the help of your team, right? And so that now involves taking that action plan and expanding on it, right? And so this specific item that we need to do, what's the timeline to complete it, right? What are the practical timelines to get through each one of these tasks, these milestones? What resources are needed to accomplish this, right? Do I need somebody from finance? Do I need somebody from engineering? Do I need somebody from marketing? Do I need somebody from sales, right? Who are the resources that will help me to essentially take action on this goal? And then also capturing your risks, right? Capturing what risks are involved that could get in the way, right? And so when we think about now outside of our own mindset, our own limitations, what are other limitations that could prevent us from accomplishing this? Maybe we may have some budgetary issues, right? Maybe the budget isn't there, right? Or maybe there are other initiatives that are being implemented at the same time that may cause us to compete for resources, right? And so really sitting down and thinking about what is the action plan, what needs to be accomplished, what resources need to be involved, what's our budget, right? What's our timeline, can help us get closer to that goal. It's funny because I'm a project management professional, and so I think very much in that way, but it's helpful. It's definitely helpful in being able to break down something that may seem very complicated and very complex and making it just a little bit more simple.
And that is so important, folks. Having a positive outlook, having a manifestation type of mind, coupled with the tips that were given here today, will definitely position you for a prosperous 2025. That is our hope from DTLW Podcast for every listener, that you would take all these things and really put it to action, because it really does matter. At the end of the day, you're leaders for a reason, and your people are counting on you. And so I hope that, Javier, they take all that you just gave us in this segment, this episode, and actually employ it for their new year coming up. Now, talking about year coming up, you are involved in a lot of speaking, you do classes, you have all kinds of things going on. But what do you have coming up this year that the viewer or the listener can follow or support you in?
Absolutely. So you can definitely follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting different things, different techniques, different tips, experiences on LinkedIn, also on Facebook, also on Instagram. Also, I've started a new manifestation program. It's a 3 week program with 7 different workshops where we get into it. We go deep. We go deep into manifestation. We take it essentially to the next level. And so, if you're interested in that, I would love to have you as part of the program. And if you lead a team at your own company, I do a lot of workshops around the revenue growth mindset. In other words, I have workshops on how do you create a team where they are leading authentically, they're understanding their why in the work that they do. How can you get your team to recognize their value, right? The more that your team understands their value, the more successful they're going to be in the work that they do. How can you get your team to embrace change and understand that change is about becoming better versions of ourselves? How do you reduce stress? How do you remove limiting beliefs? How do you gain emotional intelligence? And so, if you're in a position to bring in a speaker or facilitate a workshop or look for workshop facilitators, I would love to. I would love to talk to your company about that as well. And so, you can reach me at info@javiercanosuccess.com. Javier spelled it with an X, like a Xavier. And then feel free to check out my websites at www.javiercanosuccess.com.
Absolutely, folks. We will have all that information as part of the video and the show notes for you to get a hold of Javier and all the things that he has going on. And I just want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, The Outlier Project, and Duco. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment. And we're always looking for new ideas and guests that can add to our show. So if you know of someone or have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast or want to sponsor our show, we'd love to hear about it by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.